There's been some major developments and a major sign also that the Biden campaign certainly sees him as a threat. They trotted out all living Kennedy family relatives who were willing to come and endorse him. Let's take a listen.
My name is Joe Kennedy.
I'm Carrie Kennedy.
Troy Kennedy.
Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
Chris Kennedy.
And I'm here to proudly endorse Joe Biden.
Joe Biden. Joe Biden.
Our future is on the ballot in a way in which we haven't seen in generations.
The only way to win this election is for everybody to go out and vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
When I think of modern politicians in our country in this century, I think Joe Biden is the RFK of his generation.
Believes in democracy, believes in human rights, believes in the freedoms.
This is a president who embodies the Kennedy legacy.
Oh my God. Let me just say this.
He believes in the freedom saga.
Do you know how insulting it is to RFK, the real RFK, who is a great man and a great politician, to say that Joe Biden is the new RFK? Whether his son is or not, that's up to him. He still has to prove that. But RFK himself, man, I think I used to at least have yeah, there we go. We got Robert Kennedy in His Times. It's a great book. I wish people would pick it up, and that is just one of those which really bothers me. But what is ironic about this is that as the Biden campaign continues to see RFK Jr. as a threat, there's actually a lot of polling now that has come out to show that he may not necessarily be just a problem for Joe Biden. Let's put this up here on the screen. This is some new data from NBC News. They say how the race shifts in a multi-way field compared to a binary choice. So what you guys can see in front of you is that with the two named candidates of Trump and Biden, that you have Joe Biden at 44, you have Trump at 46, and then you have 10% who are not sure, wouldn't vote, and other. For 5 named candidates, you have 39% for Biden, 13% for RFK Jr., 37% for Trump. So obviously that is a huge drop for Trump from 46 to 37. Biden certainly does lose some, but it appears that he's going to lose some of that 4 to 5%, Crystal, to Jill Stein and to Cornel West. And that RFK Jr. is actually pulling a decent chunk of votes away from the Trump campaign. It explains, too, why Trump has been attacking RFK Jr. recently. But this is evidence, I think, that this is the most evidence we've had so far is a very high-quality poll just to demonstrate that this very much could make things a lot easier for Joe Biden to win re-election. If anything, we can think about it a little bit in the Ross Perot vein. You know, Bill Clinton, yeah, he won 300 some electoral votes. He only won 42% of the popular vote, okay? It was H.W. Bush and Perot that took the rest. H.W. Bush, for the rest of his life, basically refused to say Ross Perot's name. I think the closest he came is he was like, I don't like to say his name. I think it cost me the election. And that was it. I mean, he was bitter to the very, very end. And I mean, maybe at a point, I'm not really sure. But my whole point is that just with 39% for Joe Biden, if RFK Jr. is able to take away, let's say even within the margin of error, let's say 10% away from Trump, that's a disaster for the Trump campaign.
So here's the breakdown of the numbers specifically. If you take the Jill Stein and the Cornel West effect out of the, instead of the 5-way race, like what happens with just the RFK voters. So it's 15% of voters who originally picked Trump when it's just Trump versus Biden. 15% of them switch to Kennedy when you give them that option. With Biden, it's only 7% who originally picked Biden, if it's just head-to-head Biden-Trump, who switched to Kennedy. So 15% for Trump versus 7% for Biden. And then they underscore something that I've been saying for a little while here, which is that Republican voters just have a much higher favorability for RFK Jr. than Democratic voters do. So you've got, among Republican voters, 40% positive and 15% negative, so really highly net positive for Kennedy among Republican voters. Democratic voters, it is polar opposite. Only 16% have a positive rating of him versus 53% who have a negative rating. Now, listen, other polls have shown the opposite effect. So I think it's very unclear at this point because at the end of the day, he's still a Kennedy. And also the other dynamic is Trump supporters tend to be more enthusiastic and more locked in than Biden's supporters. So there may be more disaffected Biden voters for RFK Jr. to pick up than Trump voters. But it is, this is something Originally, when RFK got in, all of the theorizing was like, no, he's definitely going to hurt Trump. Then it sort of switched to now it's definitely going to hurt Biden. And I think it's unclear, but if I had to say today, I think this is more of a problem for Trump because you just can't deny that there's this overwhelming negative view of him among Democratic voters. And you also still have Think about the way our politics works. I mean, everything is so centered around Trump and how you feel about Trump and how Trump feels about you, et cetera. And he's gone after RFK Jr. a bit, but more on policy. The vibes are like, hey, I like him. I think he's better than Biden, he said. So he's getting the friendly treatment from Trump. He's getting the aggressively negative treatment from the Democratic Party. And I think that sends a signal to a lot of voters of like which side he's more aligned with. I mean, it shouldn't be that way, but that's just the reality.
That's a good point. Negative polarization is one of the biggest driving forces in U.S. politics.
Exactly. Yeah. So in any case, it's interesting. I think it's still unsettled, but I am increasingly seeing there's a Wall Street Journal poll that also showed RFK Jr. taking more from Trump than from Biden, which begs an interesting question of why it is then that the Biden campaign is like so much more freaked out about him, apparently, than the Trump campaign.